Hey guys, welcome to She Knows Arsenal. My name is Jessica, I'm your host. We're going to be talking a little bit about transfers today, specifically Xavi Simons, who is a young winger slash midfielder that plays for PSV. You guys may remember him. He absolutely annihilated us in the Europa League earlier on this season, and we have been linked to him today. So we're going to be chit-chatting a little bit about what type of player he is. Would he be a good fit for Arsenal? Do we think PSV will sell? And all of those types of things. So make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me see what y'all are up to. I know it's Friday and you guys probably have so many things you want to do this weekend, but we got to stay up on transfers. We definitely do, because the window will be open before we know it. And from an Arsenal perspective, this is a massive window. And as Arteta's already said, and other people around the club have said, they have to get it right. They have to get it spot on. So most of the players that we've been linked to, for me, have seemed like they align with what we're trying to do. And I don't think Xavi Simons is any different. Let's see what you guys are saying. Leon is saying PSV won't sell him. It's interesting. Crispy says he's a great player, first team potential. Mo says let's get it. And Lucas is responding to Leon saying, what's going on here? Hold on real quick. Something is not right. There we go. There was like lag. Absolutely annihilated. Okay. There was a little bit of lag, so I couldn't see whether or not you guys could see me or not. But now I can see that you guys can see me. So yeah. Liam says, Jess, if you could sign 3 players, who would they be? Only 3 players. That is going to be a tough one. But I would say, from a midfield perspective, because that's the most important, I would go with Declan Rice, because he's our number 1 target, and I'd like Arteta to get his number 1 target. I guess right back, I think that's also pretty important. I have liked the look of the guy Sacha Boey that we've been linked to. I know, some people are calling him a Tavares and stuff like that, but I think that's just, a fullback that's athletic is being called Tavares. He looks pretty good, and Brighton are also linked with him. So, most people would take most players that Brighton recruit. And so I'd probably sign him as well. And then I'm not sure, because I would say Moises Caicedo, just because, you want to be greedy and you want to get Declan Rice in Moises Caicedo, right? That would be an excellent overhaul from a midfield perspective. I guess I'm not quite convinced that Arteta wants to play with a Caicedo type player in the 8 or Declan Rice in the 8 position. So maybe the player will look a little bit different, but it's a tough one. I really have to think about it, because we have so many things we need to get done. From a center back, like if you wanted to bring in a center back, I like Mark Gahey. Premier League proven, more of a hard-nosed, no-nonsense type of defender, which I do think Arsenal are lacking. Athletic, pretty quick, so I would like to see him as well. Fresneda is a name that's always been thrown around, even though I haven't seen him play that much. So, yeah, it's a tough one, because I'm not 100% sure what Arteta wants to do with the midfield, and depending on that would change what kind of players I'd like to see brought in. Chelsea says, why not? Chelsea Mo says, why not just sign Basmati Rice and a striker? Striker, I don't know. I think people are always kind of talking about a striker, and I think it's almost like when we first bought Jesus, one of the biggest, I think, criticisms of Jesus was that he wasn't a clinical striker. Now that the season has ended and we have not won the league, a lot of people are going back and saying that that's the reason why we didn't win, or that's the reason why we can't win. I hate to be that person, but we didn't not win the league because we couldn't score goals. In fact, we scored quite a bit of goals, more goals than we've pretty much ever scored. Like we scored just as many, if not more, than we did in the Invincible season. So it wasn't really goals. It wasn't the fact that Gabriel Jesus is not a clinical finisher. We could not defend for our lives. So from my perspective, if I had to prioritize something, I would say getting a defender or two to make sure that if our key defenders get injured, we can maintain the same level of buildup and defensive structure. That's important. Overhauling the midfield and getting some more athletes in there and maybe a more attack-minded, goal-scoring midfielder in the Xhaka position is more important than bringing in a striker when we scored a shit ton of goals. You know what I mean? That's kind of where my thought process is. I'm not saying that we don't need a striker eventually, but Arsenal need a lot of things, but there's always priorities to it, and I'm not sure that striker is at the top of my list. But let's get back to the topic at hand, which is Xavi Simons. So make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel. Arsenal have been linked with him, which I was kind of waiting on this link to come, because if you guys, like a couple of weeks ago, there were reports that had come out that Xavi Simons had changed agents, and the agent that he changed to was Darren Dean. And Darren Dean, if I'm not mistaken, is David Dean's son. So which made that link feel close. Usually change agents when you want to move. And so Xavi Simons is a long-time Wonderkid. You know, he's somebody that's been around for a long time, was at La Masia, ended up at PSG, now is at PSV. And he looks like he's looking for a move. The reports are saying that he wants to play Champions League, and Arsenal are his most likely destination. Arsenal are now the most concrete option for Xavi Simons, and there's some pretty reliable sources in terms of Dutch football putting out these reports. So it's not something that I would just say, you know, let's just put it off to the side. It may not happen. I do think there's credibility to this. Xavi Simons is somebody that, you know, when he played against us in the Europa League, I thought he looked very, very good. But what I couldn't quite put my finger on is what type of player he was, where he would play on the pitch, because he looked like the type of player that plays out on the wing, but ends up playing more of a number 10 role. And from an Arsenal perspective, like, that's not necessarily how our wingers play. Our wingers are like true wingers, like Saka and Martinelli. A lot of times they're out wide. They could be quite isolated, especially Martinelli, and they need to beat their man. And, you know, we play with wingers. If you've seen, like, Trossard is somebody that I think a lot of people feel like is not a good fit as a winger for Arsenal, not because he's not a talented player, but because he's kind of similar to Xavi Simons in that way, where I think he wants to come inside and be more creative and play more in a creative role centrally rather than stay out wide. Even though, you know, I've seen Simons, you know, be able to dribble and beat a man, I think he's more of an interior player, which makes me feel like, okay, is he somebody that's going to come in and play the left 8 role? Because that left 8 role that Xhaka is vacating has to have a natural, like, creative, goal-scoring, technical footballer in it. I know that Declan Rice can potentially play a box-to-box role. I know Moises Caicedo could probably play an 8 role as well. But for that specific left 8 at Arsenal, you know, Xhaka, I don't think we're so looking for somebody that can do the defensive part of what he's doing. I think we need somebody that can give us 10, 15, 20 more % of the attacking part of the position that he was giving us. And Xavi Simons could potentially end up being that player. And, you know, I was looking at, you know, is he defensively sound and things like that. You know, on the comps, I can't really tell whether or not he's somebody that's going to get back and, stop crosses and get in the box and head the ball out. But to be quite honest, I don't really care. What I'm looking at for that position, goals, assists, creativity, because the way that our team is shaping up and the way that we're going to play, we're going to have a lot more defensive stability next season, which will allow our 8/10s and Odegaard and whoever plays across from him to be a lot more free and to play without, I think, that feeling of like oh my gosh, I need to get back and defend in my box. Do you know what I mean? And so that's what I'm looking for that position. And he seems to have a bundle of that. I mean, the guy is an absolute superstar. And, you know, I like the idea of bringing in players that have really high ceilings. There are players that we could bring in that are a little bit more maybe of a finished product. You think of somebody like a James Maddison, or I know he's probably going to end up at Manchester United, but a Mason Mount. But this player could end up being a superstar. And so maybe you go through a season of him playing off of the wing and maybe a little bit in the 8 position, and you turn him into the perfect number 8 for Arteta's system. And Gus says, good afternoon from Pennsylvania, Jess. Good afternoon to you as well. Chelsea Mo says, fair enough. I think you're responding to what I said about the striker position. Dev M says, defense is what lost us the league. I definitely agree with that. I do think that there's this idea that, like, it just goes back to, like, if you have something that maybe at the beginning of the season that you were not sure about, you know, then you can always use that as like the reason why without really backing it up. Arsenal didn't need more goals. And yeah, even though Jesus missed big chances, really, we just could not defend good enough. And that's what cost us the league. We scored more than enough goals. Marco 509 says, this feels like a big summer for Arsenal. I really hope the Cronkies finally go all in on Mikel and give Edu the budget that he needs. Yeah, I mean, that goes without saying. Like, Arsenal, I think regardless, like, I know people are like, Arsenal have got to have a big summer. Everybody has to have a big summer because the Premier League is more competitive than it's ever been. You have teams like the likes of Brighton who can recruit you under the table. I mean, they can make a £2 million player into an £80 million player like that. Aston Villa, they have money and they're looking to spend. Newcastle, their project is way ahead of schedule. Manchester City are going nowhere. Liverpool are going to come back. Like, there's, you know, more competition than ever before. So I think it's kind of like obvious to say that Arsenal need to spend big. But I think more than Arsenal spending big is Arsenal need to spend right. I think getting this spot on in terms of making sure you leave no stone unturned, like that we don't have gaping holes that we know are there and then they end up biting us in the ass again. I think making sure that, one, you tie down Saliba with a new contract and then you underpin him with somebody that can play like him is so important, because if he sustains an injury, we know we can't live with it. There's nothing we can do. Having a more defensive option that's reliable to Zinchenko, like another option, that's so important, because, you know, Zinchenko, you can't use him in every single game. Like, in games where we're going to be against deep blocks and we're going to have so much possession, and maybe games, especially in the league, when the teams are not maybe as expansive. Yeah, Zinchenko is perfect for that. But, you know, sometimes you have to have a little bit more pragmatism in your game. And I think that's also something that cannot go unfixed. You know what I mean? And then midfield, because that is the position that we haven't really had the overhaul in. We've brought in, you know, a new striker or some more attackers, which was something that was kind of left to the end. Now midfield needs a huge overhaul, and Arsenal need to bring in 2 midfielders and make sure that, you know, we don't have the same problems that we've had. My kind of feelings on the midfield are that, like, Thomas Partey and Granit Xhaka are a great partnership, but they definitely need each other. Like, for a long time, people were saying, like, Thomas Partey was hand-holding Granit Xhaka. I actually think Granit Xhaka was holding Thomas Partey's hand quite a bit as well, because he would give him that defensive cover that he needed when he wasn't at 100% peak fitness, which a lot of times Thomas Partey doesn't look like he's at 100% peak fitness. He's also not that agile and doesn't cover ground that well. Thomas Partey is one of those weird players where, because of, I think, what he looks like, people assume that he's super athletic, but actually his best skill set is on the ball. And so Arsenal need to have somebody in that position, one that can play every 4 games or every 4 days, but can also, like, withstand the physical requirement to play in a 6 by yourself. Xhaka was doing a lot of the dropping in and helping him, and that's why I feel like a lot of Arsenal fans feel like we need a player like Granit Xhaka, is because Thomas Partey needs a player like him to operate the way that he does. moving forward, like in order to unleash that 8-10 role and make sure that person is fully up there giving us goals and assists, they can't be hand holding the number 6. And I think that's why we're looking at Declan Rice. Austin says, how do you feel about the links to Dominic Szoboszlai? Has height, physicality, technique, and crazy dip on free kicks. I think he's a player we've been linked to several times. I think he's really talented, but he's a good player. I'm not sure that he's somebody that I would necessarily say like we have to be go get. Like, he's talented, but I don't know if I necessarily see him at Arsenal. Nashville says Partey was not mobile enough when we played 2 lightweight 8s, and I think that's so important to remember. Is Arteta, like, first of all, I think Arsenal fans sometimes can be really short-sighted. They see us try something one time and it doesn't work and they feel like they're never going to see it again. Arteta has been trying to put 2 lightweight 8s in the system for a very long time. I remember when we played against Sunderland in maybe the League Cup. It was the game that I think Nketiah got the hat trick. I think it was also the game that we realized that Florian Balogun wasn't quite ready to come into the first team. But we started off with El Neni, Emile Smith-Rowe, and Odegaard, and we were getting killed by Sunderland, and Arteta switched it up and did something different, I think, in the second half, like, to give us more stability. But he's been trying it. Like, he tried it, I think, against Villarreal in the Europa League semifinal. Like, this is something that Arteta's been looking towards, but the number 6 is kind of what holds you back, because that player has got to be able to do it pretty much on their own. They have to be like a one-man midfield in there, and Thomas Partey doesn't have the mobility, the physicality, or he doesn't have that, even though he's such a good player. So yeah, we definitely, if we want to move into that system, and if we're looking at players like Xavi Simons, like, that player has to change as well. But Xavi Simons has had like a phenomenal season as well, like for PSV. I know you guys remember him playing against us, like he was an insanity. Like, he really was, like, he was on fire. Maybe he was thinking like, I want to show what I can do. It seems like players that are linked to us, they tend to play their best ever game like against us. Like, the amount of comps that there are on the internet of Xavi Simons versus Arsenal is actually insane. But this season, I think he was Golden Boot as well. 19 goals and 8 assists. 19 goals and 8 assists at 20 years of age is nothing to, like, just like bat your eyes at. Like, those are crazy numbers, really, for a 20-year-old. Again, like I said, he plays mostly out on the wing, but he tends to come central and play more like a number 10. Yeah, that's kind of what he does. And I'll pull up more of his stats. Can't go wrong with a name like Xavi, right? Right-footed, like I said, 20 years old. This has not updated his height, but he's more like 5'10". If you guys are wondering, like, is he tall enough and athletic enough? He seems like somebody that can ride challenges, that's not going to get just completely annihilated physically in the Premier League. But I mean, when we talk about numbers, I mean, he's in the top percentile for almost every single metric that you care about when it comes to your attacking players: passes completed, progressive passes, progressive carries, successful take-ons, touches in the attacking penalty area. He also has really good statistics in blocks and aerials won, which is surprising. I wonder what that's all about, but assists, goals, like, he's got that. And that's definitely what Arsenal need in that position. I am a firm believer that position is built for an attacker, a creative goal person, less than like a number 6, like trying to play the 8 position. I see what you guys are saying. Coach Day says, did you watch the epic upload of Troops, Curtis, and Lee? If so, what were your thoughts? I did not watch that. Yeah, no, I haven't watched it, but if I get a chance, maybe I'll take a peek. Let me guess, Arteta out. Nashville Gunner says 5'10", just swipes left on all players under 6 feet. You guys know I don't want our team to get really small, but for a footballer, like when I went, okay, so I did go watch Arsenal play on the last game of the season, and I was kind of close to the pitch, and when Gabriel Jesus got close to the sideline, I was like, he's actually pretty tall, or pretty tiny. Like, he's not that big of a player. Like, I think he might be like 5'8", and he's not somebody that necessarily gets knocked off the ball. Like, he's pretty, like, when he's at peak physical, like, fitness, like, he's pretty, like, tenacious, and he can ride challenges. And so it's not, for a footballer, you don't have to be 6'1", 6'2", or anything like that. For most people, it'd be like, just don't be Fabio Vieira, right? So, yeah. Rido Boy says, thank you so much for your super chat, by the way. Says, would take Xavi Simons better than Fabio Vieira. I knew it was coming. But yeah, goal scoring, a creative player that would fit in perfectly with what we're trying to do if the number 6 changes, which I think it will. Christian Estrada says Xavi Simons upgrade over Vieira physically and technically. D. Melosi has a question saying, I want both Caicedo and Rice, yet feel the midfield while defensively sound, loses some creativity. What's your take? I do think that that's the next step for Arsenal, is being able to sustain attacks more. And when we're in positions where we're playing up against deep blocks, I felt like some players ended up being a lot less effective than we needed them to be. So there was a period in time where we were struggling a little bit. It was kind of like Everton, Brentford. We played Everton again at home. We played Bournemouth. Around that period of time, like where we were still kind of winning games and getting results, but I think a lot of us could sense that something was not right. The balance was off. We were going up against these deep blocks, and we were throwing so many men forward. Some players were kind of nullified because they couldn't really unpick the locks. Like there was no movement. It was really hard. And then on transition, we were getting bypassed with like 1 or 2 passes, and that's just not good enough. Like the amount of work that Saliba and Gabriel and Ramsdale were doing during that time is the reason why I think our expected points, was so much lower than what we got, is because we were getting these crazy like saves and tackles from these players. And that's not really sustainable, right? So we need a defensive midfielder that can actually stop attacks and help sustain, pressure and doesn't get bypassed as easily. And then what you also need is somebody in the left 8 position that acts as another creative dribbler that can move players around. I think also like losing Jesus during that time, not having him hurt us because he's one of our better dribblers. So I think that is definitely something that needs to be looked at, because if you have, too many sturdy players, when you come up against those deep blocks, you don't have as much of that creativity, that cuteness in those tight areas. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely something that we need to look at for sure. Gunnar B says, I ain't giving up on my boy Vieira. You guys know I'm holding on to my Vieira stocks. We will be having conversations next season. You guys are going to be like, oh, Jessica, like I remember you saying that I should have just given patience, a little bit, because it's not like he got enough playing time, blah, blah, blah. Once he eats some chicken and rice, he'll be fine. Okay. Social Join says, I don't know about Simons. If Sané is available, like Build is saying, get Sané in. Sané is another one, but it depends on what position do you think Xavi Simons would be playing. If you think he's going to play off of the wing, then I guess you could have, a discussion on whether or not you get Simons versus Sané, because Sané at Bayern is so different than Sané at Manchester City. He plays more like a number 10, so technically they'd be quite similar, albeit one is significantly younger than the other. So you could talk about longevity and getting the most out of, if you're going to pay the same amount for a player, you might want to get the one that has the, is probably going to play for you a little bit longer and not decline as quickly. But if Xavi Simons was going to play in the left 8 position, I'm not sure that there's any real conversation, to be had. And then you also have to think, like, does Leroy Sané actually want to come back to England? I don't think he necessarily loved it here his first time around, albeit he was in Manchester versus London, which is different. But yeah, I'm not quite sure that he necessarily be on our radar. Rido Boy says, Xavi, thank you so much for your super chat, by the way, says Xavi also seems like a player that never gives up. From what I've seen, I need more of that. Yeah, from what, this is all I can really see. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I was sitting around watching the Eredivisie every single week. But from what I could see is in his comps, there were enough, clips of him running back and retrieving the ball and doing his defensive work and working hard. And from an attacker's, I don't think you necessarily need somebody to be defensive, you know what I mean? You need somebody that's willing to work hard and press. And I've seen some of that from him, albeit I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's going to make a slide tackle in the box, but he does work hard, it seems like. Christian Estrada says Xavi Simons dominated when he played against Arsenal. Yeah, I mean, it was actually not a fun game to watch. Most of our Europa League games were not fun to watch. I mean, that was one of the worst ones, really. They were on us, and it wasn't great. But he was fun to watch. I guess if you're neutral. Nashville Gunnar says, low key, I kind of want Rice and Mount. Mount is creative, but also is a dog in the press. I think the thing about Mount is he's 100% gonna probably end up at Manchester United, and I would imagine that's because he's a Chelsea boy at heart, and he probably doesn't want to go to a London rival. He's going to do the right thing and go somewhere else, so he can go off into the sunset and go to Manchester United, do his thing. I actually think he's a really good player, and under the right manager with enough consistency and the right players around him, he'll be really good. But I also think Xavi Simons does quite similar things to what Mason Mount does. Mason Mount kind of plays off the wing in a 10 position, off the left-hand side, loads of goals, creative player. And on his day is one of the best, So I think getting Xavi Simons wouldn't be like a downgrade on not getting Mount or whatever. That's not what you're saying, but I'm just saying it wouldn't be, it's not a bad comp, Let's see. Social Join says, you always give chances away playing halfway line, no matter who you have as a DM. Excuse me. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying about that, but the ease at which teams were getting in, I do think even teams even when I saw Liverpool at their pump is probably the best example of this, is they would always give away maybe one or two, maybe one, maybe two big chances a game, when they're playing high line, when they were in their prime and their pump, right? And so that's where you would get those phenomenal saves from the likes of Alisson, or, the defensive, situations with Virgil van Dijk and stuff like that. But they would only give you one or two, maybe, and you had to be perfect to get it. You had to be perfect in order to score that chance. I think we were doing it at such a rate where it became less of an infrequency and more of a problem. And so I do think that even though I do expect that to happen from time to time, I don't expect it to become something that we're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a game kind of thing. Against Brentford, they really could have scored 2 or 3 goals in the first half. Against Bournemouth, if they were better players, they would have scored 2 or 3 goals pretty easily. Everton as well, so it became more of an issue. At the beginning of the season, when we were defending well, we would only give away one of those chances, and if you weren't perfect, you didn't score. At the end of the season, it became a little bit different than that. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. And I do think your DM has a big part to play in that. I think they have to be mobile, be able to cover space, be able to tackle, intercept, things like that. Let's see. Christian Estrada says, Xhaka mentioned Arteta has a strict diet they follow. Well, keep following it. Keep following it. I mean, you're looking at players like Emile Smith-Rowe and Vieira, who are going to play, I think, bigger roles next season. And so those are two players that, physically they need to be at tip-top shape next season, or there's going to be a lot of questions asked of those two players. And so, make sure you stay on that diet and stay away from Nando's. You know what I'm saying? Let's see. Christian Estrada says, I don't know if you guys have noticed. Oh yeah, you were saying like Arteta likes his players very lean. The way he works them nutritionally makes them thinner to look, like Jorginho when he first came in. Yeah, our players are pretty like lean, and I think that so that they can. I just think you don't want your players to be too hefty. I don't really mind that. Matt G says Mount at 70 million might just be paper talk, but if he was around 45, I'd take him. And I think he will go to Manchester United for around 50 million pounds. Like, that's probably a good signing for them. For us, like, look, if we got Xavi Simons, like, I'm not going to cry about it. Like, I'm really not. I think the player is very talented, so I wouldn't be disappointed with that at all. I'm not going to cry because we don't get Mount, you know what I mean? But I think he is kind of like weirdly disrespected in a way. I'm not sure why people pile on Mount. Like, it's weird to me. Edwin says, very true. And that's why we conceded more goals than all the teams in the first 8 positions, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, we just got real stupid at the end. Like, we just could not defend transitions worth like our lives. Like, we really couldn't. And, it's just something that I think Arsenal have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, like, why did that happen? I'm sure Arteta and the team are really looking at that, because Arsenal in the first half of the season was so different than Arsenal in the second half of the season. Our goals and stuff didn't really dry up. I really think Martinelli, Odegaard, and Saka in particular were so consistent. And then bringing in Trossard really helped us out. But defensively, we were shocking towards the end of the season. We really were. And that's unacceptable. And that's why I do think that we need 1 or 2 defenders as well. Like, not because I don't think our defenders are any good, but because, like, if something were to happen, we need to have the same level of defender coming in for the player that's injured. And we know that, unfortunately, like, we're not going to be able to rely on Tomiyasu. The fact that there's already reports coming out that he may not be available for preseason and then he's going to go away to the Asia Cup pretty much is like, I'm not even counting him for next season, as like harsh as that may sound. So Arsenal really need to look at that defense and say, how can we improve this and make sure that not only do we have variety, but we have continuity. That's a really difficult thing to do. Gunnar B says, I think there's a reason why we spent 35 million on Vieira when we had other necessities, clear future planning for when the rest of the squad is complete. He will be important. Keeping my stocks. I told you guys. Mehdi says we can't get both Rice and Caicedo. One of them might get Lavia. It depends on how you think the midfield is going to be set up, because you're not going to buy Caicedo and Rice and one of them is going to sit on the bench. So you'd probably have to play both of them. Do you think that there's a good balance in our midfield if we play the way that we play, if it's Caicedo, Rice, and Odegaard? Is that a midfield that you see balance in? I mean, that is definitely a conversation. It's an expensive and talented midfield. It's a midfield that, if we're talking about stopping attacks and stuff like that, would be perfect for that. But does it have the balance that those positions require? I'm not sure that it does. And so I don't think getting Rice and Caicedo is really about the financial aspect of it. I think it's about the profile that's more necessary in that left 8 position. And I know that people have their heart set on Caicedo because we went after him in January, but we went after him when we didn't have a number 6. And so I think that he might just be off the table just because, like, we'll go after Rice and that's our number 1 target, and the left 8 needs to be something different. I would love to get the 2 of them. Just to be greedy, because I don't want to see Caicedo go anywhere else. I think he's fabulous. But I'm not sure that I believe that the balance is really there when you look at the requirement for that left 8 position. Even though, like, man, that would be that would be a coup in itself to get the 2 of them. It really would. Arnolito says Caicedo, Rice, Odegaard is the perfect midfield when away to another big team. I hear what you're saying. There's different horses for different courses, or whatever the saying is, that, you're not going to be able to go to every single ground and play with the same type of group. You want to have something different. But depending on who leaves and who stays, I mean, we do have other players that exist within the squad already that could do similar things. I think if you're looking for a more sturdy midfield three, maybe you could even play like Thomas Partey and Declan Rice, in a double pivot, so I get what you guys are saying, that you want to have like different options. But I guess my thought process on this also is like, so if we don't get an attacking 8, that means that the attacking 8s that we'll be not forced to use, but we'll have to rely upon, will be Odegaard, Emile Smith-Rowe, and Vieira. And I'm not sure that that's enough. I'm not sure that that's enough. I think we need one more. So would I rather add Caicedo and Rice and maybe miss out on that attacking 8? Or do I rely on some combination of Jorginho and Thomas Partey to kind of be those additional sturdy options and get a fantastic attacking 8 that completely changes how we play? Because we're not going to get 3 midfielders, so you got to choose. You really do. Boomer Gooner says, we haven't had enough quality to rotate our midfield based on circumstances since 2003-2014. Depth has always kind of been an issue, especially in recent times. Nashville Gooner says, if you get Rice and Simmons, then you play White and Kiwi at wingback. Exactly, like we've already kind of seen the workings of that, with Kiwior playing at left back and, Thomas Partey playing at right back. I think that was also like, you could look at that and say like, well, maybe that's what we're going to do with Caicedo. But, I'm not necessarily 100% sure that's what you like. Even though it would make sense, I actually just think Arteta was like looking at something for next season. Like he was looking at, okay, put Kiwior in left back and then invert on the other side. Maybe that's a look to a different right back. Maybe it's not Ben White. Maybe it's, maybe he was looking at it for like a Cancelo type or something like that. We don't know yet, but I understand the idea that like Caicedo would be perfect because he's the perfect player in isolation. But I still think we need that attacking 8, and I think we'll get it and we'll miss out on Caicedo because we're going to get Rice, or we're going to try to. Let's see. Ify says, we need to get both Caicedo and Rice. We need the squad to push in all competitions, but I agree that the club won't get both. Everybody's Caicedo at inverted right back. You guys, I get it. Like, I get what you guys are saying. Like, I see it, understand it. As soon as I saw Thomas Partey playing there, I was like, ooh, that looks interesting. That looks cool. Now, one way that you could get away with it, I guess, is if Xavi Simons ends up being your attacking signing. If Xavi Simons ends up being your attacking signing, meaning you don't bring in a striker or a winger, or like a right winger, and you bring him in as kind of like a versatile attacker, then I guess you could still go for Rice and Caicedo and do the two of them. You could still do that. Just, I get it, you guys. This is Arsenal, remember. This is Arsenal, remember. Christian Estrada says ESR physically wouldn't be enough as an 8. They're saying that they're trying to get him to play that position, and they're, working on him playing there next season. I'll believe it when I see it. I just find Emile Smith-Rowe to be a little, what it is with him is like he's 6 foot tall. And so physically, I think he could do it if he got a run of games. My concern about Emile Smith-Rowe is the fact that I think sometimes in a game he can let it go by him. And as a midfielder, especially for Arsenal, you have to have loads of personality. You have to be willing to get on the ball, make things happen. And even with Xhaka, like, he wasn't the perfect fit for that position, but he was always willing to get on the ball. He didn't hide from it. And I feel like that position requires somebody that's going to take quite a few touches. And, Emile Smith-Rowe tends to be the additional person, not the main feature. And so when you have him on the wing, you don't lose anything in midfield. When you have him in midfield, you lose a little bit of something because he doesn't quite have the personality to get on the ball and make things happen. The only time I really seen him do it was against Brentford on the first day of the season. not this season, but the season prior. And that was his best midfield performance, like bar none. That was the best one. I know we lost, but that was the only time I seen him get on the ball, make things happen, get involved in build up. But I found his midfield performances to be quite tame, and midfielders at Arsenal need to get on the ball and make things happen, be creative, not shy away, so I'll believe it when I see it. But, Emile Smith-Rowe not being sold, I do think is probably the right thing right now, because even if you did want to sell him, you probably wouldn't get a good bid for him anyway. You know what I mean? So give him another season, see what he can do, and then go from there. But again, like I said, like Emile Smith-Rowe and Vieira, and you guys know I love Vieira, so I'm not, just, singling out Emile Smith-Rowe. The two of them need to really go up a level. They need to buck up, they need to get with it. They need to be players that come off of the bench and make things happen. They can't just let games pass them by. So both of them are going to have to have big seasons next season. Jonathan says Jesus is class and will be class on the wing. Everybody wants to put him on the wing, which is hilarious. I don't think it's going to happen, you guys. Let's see. Martin says, any news on Patino? Is he going to play a role next season? By all accounts, it looks like he's getting sold, so I think he's going to go, but Arsenal will insert a buyback clause. So we will see. And even though Jesus played wing at Manchester City, here's the thing is there's a reason why Zinchenko and Jesus are both at Arsenal. And it's not because they're not talented players, but it's because they couldn't get a game in at Manchester City because there was better players in the positions that they played. And so for Jesus, he had lost a lot of confidence playing in the 9 position at Manchester City because they were putting him on the wing. Because, I think something was going on mentally with him in terms of confidence and finishing off chances. And when he's off it, he's really off it. We know that, right? And so coming to Arsenal, when you listen to the interviews that he did initially at Arsenal, what he spoke about was gaining his confidence back as a number 9. And so the last thing you're going to want to do as a manager is to take a player that you brought in for a specific position, and the reason why he came to you is because he was going to play number 9 for you, and then a season later bring in a striker and then shunt him out to the wing. That is a surefire way to just kill off Jesus. It's not going to work. With Zinchenko, same thing. The last thing I think we're going to do is bring in Cancelo and then play him at left back, because that's the reason why Zinchenko is here. It's because he couldn't get a game in because Cancelo was there. So there's a management aspect of things where Arteta brought in these 2 players to kind of take us to the next level. They have, but you still have to kind of honor them and respect them enough not to do the thing that was the reason why they're here in the first place, if that makes sense. So at least in the short term, in the long term, maybe things will change. I do think Arsenal will eventually look for a complete number 9, but I don't think it's going to be a year after we brought him in. I really don't. Let's see. So yeah, it's just one of those, right? Karen says, no one cares if he's better than him. I don't care. No sentiments in football. Yeah, there's no sentiments in some ways, but you still have to manage players correctly. And so there's a balance to it where, if Jesus next season was to really just fall off a cliff, then I can understand bringing in the number 9 then. But it's not going to be after this first season and he was quite good. I don't necessarily feel like Jesus is the player that we need to be being cutthroat with after this season. I'm not quite sure that that's the position that needs to be cutthroat. I think there's several other positions, especially in midfield, where we need to be looking at a lot more closely. Let's see. Christian says, everything changes once you play Champions League. I don't know if everything necessarily changes just because you're playing Champions League. I do think that priorities are always need to be factored in. And so again, is Jesus is getting another option, especially a complete number 9, a bigger priority than overhauling the midfield and making sure the defense is not a shambles, like once Saliba is out of it. I think those things are more important. And as much as Arsenal fans are not going to want to hear this, we're not going to get absolutely everything that you want in one window. We're not going to get a right winger, a striker, 3 midfielders, 2 fullbacks, and a center back. It's not going to happen. Arsenal are probably going to bring in 4 players. 2 of those will probably be midfielders. So what do you want to miss out on? You know, it's one of those where I just don't think that the number 9 is going to get addressed. And it's not going to be the type of number 9. If you bring him in, it's not going to be the type that you want. You know, it's not going to be a Vlahovic. It's not going to be an Osimhen. It's, you know, so yeah. It's just not a priority. And I'm not sure that Gabriel Jesus is the main thing that we need to be looking at. You know, let's see. Medi says, what would you prefer, a winger or a striker? I mean, if I had to choose between the 2 of those, I would say, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, a versatile attacker would be great. Like, that's probably what I would look at. But, you know, we have Reece Nelson, and I think, you know, he can do a good job. But I still think we need one more winger. But the winger market's not great right now, so maybe look at strikers. But the striker market is a little strange, too, because all of the types of strikers that Arsenal fans really want are the types of strikers that are going to want to be the number 9 at the club. And I just don't see that happening right now. So I would say probably a winger. But really, if I'm honest with you guys, I'm not 100% like focused on the attack. I'm more focused on changing up that midfield, because that midfield needs work, and the defense, you know, because those are the things that I think were keeping us back last season. Tawanda says, winger, someone rotate with Saka. I think that's really important too. Rido Boy, thank you so much for your super chat. Says, I won't accept any less than 5 players this summer. Well, you better go knocking on Edu's door and make sure he gets it done for you. Let's see. Arnolito says, striker for me, but it can wait till next season when the options are better. That's kind of what my feeling is on it. I think it will happen, but it just won't happen this summer. We're not going to get absolutely everything. And I wouldn't want to bring in a subpar option either, just to get it done. You know what I mean? Christian says we need somebody to push Saka. His mentality tends to be a bit soft when he starts getting kicked around. Well, I'd like to see you get kicked around the way Saka does. I think he does really, I mean, he's somebody that started like every single game for us, or is featured in every single game for us. Gabriel Magalhaes started every game for us this season. You know, so I don't actually agree with Saka being soft. I just feel like when you play a player throughout the entire season, what the fans tend to see is players going in and out of form, and every player goes in and out of form. It's not just Saka. We just see it because he plays every single game. I think Saka for 90% of the season, maybe even 95%, was absolutely out of this world. I think he had an excellent season that has been downplayed off because, you know, he had the dip in form right at the end. And yeah, he does have to look at himself in the mirror and say like, okay, next season when it's the most important games, I can't fall off, you know, I can't. But at the same time, like, we just end up seeing his dips in form because he plays every single game. Same thing with Martinelli. He had a little dip in form and everybody was like losing their shit. He just needed to sit for a couple of games, come back, and he was fresh again. I think we have a really difficult time watching our players go through normal things that other players go through as well. Austin Mitchell said he played 1,000 more minutes than Jack Grealish. Ify says Saka is fine. Arteta just needs to know when to rest him. Even KDB didn't play every game all season. One of Pep's biggest strengths is his ability to rotate his players. I think Gundogan, KDB, and Bernardo Silva or Rodri, one of those, like, they've all played like the same amount of games, you know. It's perfectly done, you know, but also you need to have, I think it's a two-way thing, right? You need to have the right type of quality to feel confident to make those changes, but you also need to trust the players. And I think for Arteta, it's less about the quality and more about the trust. Not saying that like, Vieira and Emile Smith-Rowe and all these players are like phenomenal players, but they're Premier League stats, like level players. Like they could do more. And when you don't trust them and you don't give them playing time, and the only time you play them is when you're forced to play them, I don't think it reinforces their confidence, and they don't have the games under their belt to really get going. And so I think Arteta definitely needs to work on that and use the players a lot better. Reece Nelson, Emile Smith-Rowe, Vieira, and I think he already said he feels like he didn't get the best out of the players that we already had, which is probably like, I think, an immediate kind of like review of how he performed this season, which was probably my biggest gripe with him, is the Arsenal fan base seems to be almost gaslit into thinking that the players that we have on the bench are absolute shit because Arteta doesn't use them. And it's not that. Like, those players are not bad, and there's worse teams that have worse bench options that rotate more than us. When you look at, there's a chart that had come out, I think it was from The Athletic, that showed that Arsenal rotate the least out of the entire, Premier League. And Manchester City probably do it the most. We should be a lot closer to them with the players that we have in our team than we are, so I think we need, obviously, like the quality always needs to go up, like obviously, like it always needs to improve, but really we need to use the bench a lot more, for sure. Francis says, bring in Caicedo and Rice for 160 million, a defender for 40 million, Xavi and Zaha on a free, and would be a great window, and these signings will make us better and stronger for all competitions. That sounds like a decent window to me. Matt G says, in fairness, it's easy for Pep to rotate because City players know they will be challenging for 4 trophies, so they'll be happy to not play every minute. You guys can let me know if you agree with this or not, but I feel like there was like a very, I wouldn't say like, what do I want to say? Because I don't want to say that I feel like they didn't try hard, but I don't feel like there was like a desperation to win the Europa League or any level of like where I felt like those players that were coming into those Europa League games were fighting for positions or anything like that. And, that's something that definitely needs to change, because the vibration level and like that's the only way that I can really think of it, because when you watch Arsenal, you know whether or not you're watching Arsenal or you're watching Arsenal or Arsenal. And in the league, we were watching Arsenal, in those cups, we were watching Arsenal. And so although I kind of understand what you're saying, like they feel like they're going to be fighting for 4 cups, and so it's easier for them to rotate. I'm not sure that I feel like that excuses some of the performances and the lack of energy maybe and commitment to those cups, that I feel like it feels like it was almost like okay for them to go out of those cups. There wasn't a desperation to win. It was a struggle for us to beat. Who was that? We wore the white kit and we struggled to beat that team. It was bad, and, so that's definitely something that needs to change next season. I don't want to say that I don't feel like they tried, but I know that they didn't try as hard as they did in the Premier League because we watched this team play. It was Oxford. John Donut says, yeah, there's definitely was not, they were acting like they had bigger fish to fry, shaking my head. And maybe that's something that was throughout the entire club. They felt like they could win the Premier League, so this and that. But like in reality, you should put your best foot forward in every single competition. And we have a team that's good enough to win the cups. Like we could, so I just feel like that's definitely something that needs to be looked at. Like we can't next season be going out of the cups all early and stuff. Like it just, we need more than that. Nashville Gunner says, we always suck in the white kit. Watch the tapes. Yeah, that white kit, I don't like seeing it. I know it's for a good cause, but it just gives me the creeps. Matt G says, I agree with that, Jess. The Europa League players didn't feel like they gave everything to get into the first team, and maybe they felt like, and that's the thing, it's one of those, it's a two-way street. You have to feel confident in using the players, but you also have to have the quality to be able to trust those players to come in. For Arsenal, it's like you have to play hard in every single game that you get a chance to play in, because that's how you get a look in to the starting lineup in the Premier League. But at the same time, if you know that no matter what you do, you would not start, then what's the point of playing hard in those games? And I have a feeling that maybe some players felt like that, because the starting lineup picked itself. You know, it really did pick itself. And unless it was injury enforced, the lineup was what it was. And I do feel like you want to have continuity and you want to have players that have played with each other before, but you need to have competition for places. And we didn't necessarily have that. Jonathan says, on the money, Jess, I think the sideline players don't try. They think their starting 11 already set, so no way in it. It's just there was just a lack of energy really towards the cups, and I felt like it was obvious in the Europa League that there wasn't the level of commitment that needed to be there, and we tried to kind of, I think, do the bare minimum to get through, and it wasn't enough. So yeah, next season, I definitely think there needs to be more competition for places. I don't necessarily feel like you need to have 2 Odegaards, 2 Sakas, 2 Martinellis, 2 Salibas to do that. If you were to bring in somebody like Gahey, you bring in somebody like Xavi Simons, you know, you bring in a Rice, you bring in another player, whatever. And when Reece plays well, you give him the playing time in the next game. You know, when Emile Smith-Rowe plays well, he gets, more minutes. You do those little things, and I think that the general energy level in all competitions goes up. But what do I know? I'm not a coach, but like if I was a player, and I was a player before, like I've been on teams where I was a starter. I've been on teams where I was on the bench. And if I felt like there was never a chance for me to start, no matter what I did, I was going to be on that bench, my commitment levels did drop. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's 152 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. Again, we're just kind of talking about Xavi Simons. I'm a player that's been linked to Arsenal, the most likely option at this point, and somebody that Arsenal are very interested in bringing in the summer. And we've kind of already spoken about like what position he could potentially play. He's kind of like plays off of the wing, but kind of plays like a number 10. So maybe he's the winger option. Maybe he's the versatile attacker that we've been looking for, or maybe he's the creative number 8 that we've been looking for. You guys tell me, but I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. It's 6. And the top 6 show is on the Football Terrace. I'm not on it, but you guys want to go over there, you guys should enjoy that show. They're going to be talking about transfers for all the top 6 clubs plus Newcastle, I think. So tune in there. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I know we kind of talked about a bunch of different things, but I really appreciate everybody that super chatted and got in the comments and let me know what you guys thought. Make sure you guys like this video. Like I said, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.